Dark Souls has become a legendary series, and the original port on PC was actually one of the worst ports to ever be done by a professional studio. It was abysmal, and it still is kind of really, really wonky, especially even now that we have a bunch of mods to fix things. It still has a bunch of issues. I tried recording footage, because I'll have footage of it a little bit later, and I had the game break on me multiple times because the game just was not built very, very well. And so mods do a lot to fix it, and some people have argued that the modded version of the original looks better and like plays better, etc., etc. I strongly disagree with that, and I'll explain why in this video, but of course, this is all about details of the PC version. Michael here with a PC overview for Dark Souls Remastered. Now, I have both versions of the game, and just this last month, I was playing through Dark Souls again. I was playing through and just being like, I'm gonna finish the game, and then they announced the remaster. I'm like, all right, I'll wait again. I'll just wait, because I've never actually finished the game, because I always try to go to the DLCs, and then I get other stuff, because I'm a busy human being. But regardless, the problem with this is the fact that we've had the original Dark Souls for so long, we've had people modding it and kind of improving it piecemeal over time, and so we have a mod called DS Fix. Now, base game, if you're talking about no mods whatsoever, this is extremely better, like 1,000 times better. There are a ton of problems with this port I'll talk about in a minute, but it's still really, really good in comparison to the original port. That said, it's also not a great port. There are a lot of problems with it, and it has a lot of little tiny glitches that they're trying to patch out. They've actually had 2 different patches since it's released yesterday, but they are actually, trying to fix things, which is good, so things could change, but it's not perfect, and there are a lot of issues with it. So it's not great, but it's way better than what we had. Now, when you actually add in the DS Fix mod to the original, then you get into the question mark of whether this one's worth buying or not, because this is not going to free to people who already own Dark Souls. If you already own Dark Souls, it's on a discount. It's $20 instead of $40, but they're re-releasing the game as a $40 product on PC, which is ridiculous. On console, it makes sense because I do that all the time, and it's all on a new console and everything, which makes sense, but on PC, we already have the game, and we can already play through it, and this is not a new experience. It does have some balance changes and stuff like that. We'll talk about those a little bit later. Now, my thoughts on all those changes and stuff like that will come later, but first, we're going to be talking about the PC-specific stuffs and the graphics and etc., etc. So let's go ahead and go into it. Now, first off, I noticed they have a continue option, which is really nice. It just jumps you right back into your last save, which the old version did not have. And so that's actually super, super nice, because otherwise you had to go back into the load game thing, which is a little bit annoying. I'll have to do that because I had a different thing for recording. Then you also get a bunch of other options, such as logging in. You'll notice in the top left, like they are doing patches, you can see the version numbers and stuff, and you can also see that I'm offline. You actually have an option to go online or offline. So if we go into the system options here, there's actually a network setting. So if I don't want to play online, I can turn that off. Now, there is a problem if you're looking to get this game for online, because one of the things they did was they added dedicated servers for the PvP and kind of basically relivened it up, because people still played the original Dark Souls. The problem is, hackers have already gotten to it. And so people are getting banned left and right because a hacker went into their game. And so they're having the problem that they had with the original Dark Souls again, and the problem they had with Dark Souls 2, and the problem they had with Dark Souls 3, and the problem they had with Bloodborne. They don't know how to make a freaking online game with anti-cheat. So, long story short, don't buy this game for online yet. Wait for a little bit and see how it actually pans out, because the original still works with multiplayer. However, they added in a bunch of different multiplayer stuff, such as 6 players can be in one world at the same time now, and so you can actually have like good PvP arena type stuff, and people have said that's really, really fun, except for the hackers. You can also add in passwords and local matchmaking or global and stuff like that, so there's a bunch of new features there, which is super, super nice. But going into the actual options of the game, here are your gameplay options. You get a few more that we didn't have in the previous one, my favorite being UI scale. I am on 1440 by I'm on a 1440p monitor, which means that my screen is a little bit larger and I have a lot more screen space, but the UI looks really, really blurry when it's actually blown up to that, because it's obviously made for 1920 by 1080. And so I have the scale down to 75, which is where it would be normally at 100% of their normal scale if they were in like Photoshop or something along those lines. And so there you go. That's what I have. So the UI is going to look a little bit smaller on this because all my footage is downsampled to 1920 by 1080. So I apologize for that, but it looks much cleaner on my end, and hopefully it records clean as well. And then you also get these things called toggle auto lock on, which is a little bit annoying. I turned it off, and then you get the camera auto why can I not talk right now? Camera auto wall recovery, which supposedly moves the camera off of walls for you. I found that this just randomly grabs my camera and flings it around when I don't want it to. Now, I'm the type of person who plays a lot of action games, so I know how to move the camera around. So this might help some people, especially if you're not somebody who plays a lot of games or you're not used to third-person games specifically. This can help you, and it actually works when you're not moving the camera on your own. That said, though, if you are somebody who moves the camera on your own, you're going to find problems with this, and it will just grab your camera randomly, and it makes the kind of camera control feel really wonky. So turn both of these off if you are somebody who normally uses the camera a lot. And then you get multiple volume sliders and stuff like that, which is super, super nice. I don't remember what the volume sliders were on the other version, but there you go. brightness, this game has a lot more contrast in it. There's a lot more darker areas and there's a lot more brighter areas in this game, and that changes some of the aesthetics. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Key settings, you can rebind absolutely everything. Now, on the original Dark Souls, there was a kind of mod that you can end up doing this with as well called DS Fix, and that we'll talk about that a little bit later. And a lot of the graphic stuff you can end up doing with DS Fix as well. But this game actually has native support, and you can actually rebind, double bind keys and things like that, so that one key can do 2 actions, which doesn't particularly work well. I don't think you're supposed to be able to do that, but you can do that. And so it works on the gamepad as well, but you cannot rebind your movement keys or your mouse, which means that if you're using like mouse button 3 and 4 or something along those lines, you can't rebind them, which is a little bit annoying. You can also change your stuff into a keyboard and alt mode, which it allows you to supposedly use other stuff. My touchpad buttons were working on this, and so supposedly you could rebind anything into this mode. And so if you have those mouse keys, maybe you're able to put them in here. I haven't tried it, but there you go. So you actually have 3 different modes you can go into. I'm using a controller because that's how I learned to play this game. And then we already talked about network settings. Here is the PC specific stuff. We actually have the resolution options. Now it does support up to 4K, but I'm only running on 1440 on this monitor, and so there you go. But you actually have a nice selection of resolutions, not just 16:9, which is super, super nice. And so this is the first time that's actually supported non-16:9 resolutions, which is good. Even with the SFX, there were problems with it. Frequency is always stuck at 60 hertz. I don't even know why this is an option. Maybe they're thinking about adding in a 30 hertz mode. One problem with this is that the game is tied to frame rate, its game speed. And so if your frame rate dips, so does your game speed, and the game will slow down a ton. It does not support frame skipping, which is super annoying because that's something we were able to get working with DS Fix, which was super, super nice. However, in this game, I have had solid performance for the most part, except for some random hitching here and there, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That has to do with loading bugs that we'll talk about. And then we get display mode, you get borderless, windowed, and full screen. I have to play the game in full screen because of those stuttering and issues I was talking about in a second ago. We'll talk about it later. Then you get VSync. I have to play with it on. Some people have to play with it off. Once again, it's a little bit glitchy here and there when it comes down to display modes. Anti-aliasing, which you're actually able to use temporal. I just turn anti-aliasing off because I don't care. I hate motion blur, depth of field, and ambient occlusion, both of which look better than the original one. However, it's not customizable like it was with the DS Fix mod. So again, the mod kind of adds in a little bit more. Now, things that we don't see that the DS Fix mod had in the original one is the shadow quality. We weren't able to customize in this version of the game. However, in the original, if you had that DS Fix mod, it added things like that. We don't see that here. However, the shadows look pretty dang good anyways. So yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and actually load into my game. Now, I have a second save here that I actually just started, but I'm going to go ahead and load up this one, which has my mouse face lady. I'm actually restarting the game because I messed a few things up, and I kind of just want to go back through some of the beginner areas of the game and kind of re-experience some of it, because this is mostly my testing character. But here we are in Firelink Shrine. My controller just died, and so I'm going to fix that real quick. But let me talk about the DS Fix mod real quick, because I hate when this happens on camera, because I've been playing all day and I forgot to switch the batteries before the video started. But yeah, so DS Fix was a mod for the original game, which was a really terrible port. The Prepare to Die edition was originally released. I put these on backwards. God dang it. Was originally released on PC, and it was absolutely abysmal. And it was basically unplayable. You couldn't use the keyboard and mouse. It wouldn't lock the mouse to the or lock the mouse to the window. The camera controls were abysmal. The controller had a bunch of inputs that just didn't work, and it felt really floaty all the time. And DS Fix went in to kind of fix that. It had a bunch of resolution issues. It was stuck at 720p, which was really, really abysmal. So it was pretty blurry, and all the visual effects and stuff like that were stuck to that too. The remastered edition, however, has scalable effects. So all the effects are actually higher resolution and stuff like that. And so it's native, and the resolution goes up to 4K and stuff like that. I don't know if it goes higher. I think people have gotten DSR to go higher. But here is the actual beginning area of the game, which I actually had to walk back to actually get footage of it. But I want to throw up some footage of the original Dark Souls, because if you're just looking for a visual enhancement, I'll go ahead and throw up that footage now, and you'll notice that it really doesn't look all that much different. In fact, it's a little bit brighter, and my character's skin is super, super white. The shading and the lighting has been drastically improved. And so if I show a little bit of the Firelink Shrine and then come back to my actual footage here, you'll see that the game does look a little bit better. What they have actually done is they've gone through, they've enhanced a lot of the effects. The effects are the biggest thing. The resolution has been improved. And so you can actually go through and look at it, and it actually looks pretty dang pretty. The physics have been improved. The actual, textures have been slightly improved here and there. Some of the boss textures specifically. I'll end up showing some of the starter footage in a second. Actually, I'll just throw it up right now. And that has really, really nice textures on specifically the demon's butt for some reason. It's a lot less blurry and stuff like that. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that on the actual footage itself, because, again, it is downsampled. But, again, this is the type of stuff that isn't really going to be all that critical when it comes down to actually playing the game. Now, showing off some footage from the DS fix from the original starter area, I'll just kind of like show off little snippets. I don't actually know exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm probably gonna show the demon down in the tunnel and show off some of the lights, because the lighting, again, is the biggest effect that has been improved inside of the game. And so when you end up looking at the lights, like the fire, for example, the fire is much brighter on the remastered edition. The actual like character lighting that actually travels through the hallways looks so much better, and the distance is so much clearer and just clean. In general, like the entire game just looks and feels much cleaner, and that includes the UI. A lot of the UI has been improved, even though it's the same types of textures and it looks exactly the same, it still ends up looking clearer, and I think that's just because the game in general has been made less blurry. The depth of field is much farther away and much more calculated, and so it actually has a nice smooth transition rather than being very, very sudden like it was in the original. And when it comes down to the bosses and enemy textures, they've been improved a slight amount. There's still some issues, like with fur. Like, I'll switch over to my camera here, you'll see on the rat and stuff like that. Like, that fur effect is still being used, and it still looks awful, which I think is an issue with the engine. But overall, the game, it doesn't look good enough to be really a remaster. It looks like something that could have been like a texture update or something along those lines. Now, oops, I didn't mean to do that, but okay. One of the things that can't be done with the remaster, or like be done in the original with a patch, however, is the actual improvements to the game engine. Now, there is some weird kind of stuff I was noticing with some of the enemies and some of the AI and some of the kind of interactions that I was having, is that the enemies in the remastered edition are much quicker and respond much better to what you end up doing, and the physics, again, are much better. Things just feel a little bit smoother, and the game actually runs at a solid 60. Now, on the original Dark Souls, you were able to kind of get that on some machines. I was able to kind of get it with a DS fix here and there, but I still noticed a lot of drop downs, especially when a lot of visual effects would go into the screen, such as, you know, a boss slamming down or something like that. It would always drop frames. Even in that footage that I had a second earlier, it was having massive frame drops whenever like the monster would drop down on its buttocks or whatever, and it would end up slamming down. All those dust particles would cause massive frame drops, and it would go all the way down to like 40 FPS sometimes, depending on the area and location, which wasn't good. And Blighttown was completely unplayable in the original one because it would drop down to 30 FPS. Now, the benefit to the DS fix is the fact that it supported frame skipping, which the remaster natively does not. Now, somebody could end up modding it in. However, at the moment, it's not modded in. Nobody has figured out how to do it yet. And so therefore, when you end up dropping frames, because there are times when the frame rate will drop, you will end up losing sort of some game speed. Some of your game speed will end up slowing down, and you're like, all right, well, now what do I do? Because my game is just running slower. And so it just makes the game feel a lot less smooth. It just feels unresponsive, and it's just really, really slow. That said, though, when the game is actually running at 60 FPS, the game feels incredibly smooth. The timings are so much better because with the DS Fix version, again, it was a hack. And so a lot of the timings were somewhat off. Some of the keyframes were a little bit weird. And so you actually had to hit it in weird sections. But in the actual remastered edition, since it is native, they were able to go through and redo all the timings. And so parrying is a lot easier. Dodging and stuff like that feels much more responsive and much more appropriate for the way that it's supposed to look. Oh, I just died. Sorry, I'm playing really incredibly careless. And here's the death effects. You'll actually see there's a lot more particle effects, and the text is a little bit clearer and stuff like that, but everything else is exactly the same. Again, it's not a complete overhaul of the game. And that said, oh, dang it, I should have sat at the thing. All right, whatever. I wanted to go back to my other thing anyway, so I'll go back to my other save in a second. But it's not like a complete overhaul of the game. There are some balance changes, and there are some nice little additions that they've added here. So, for example, if I go into my inventory, do I have multiple souls? I do. So you can actually go through and be like, use item, and you can actually select multiple souls. And there's a bunch of little tiny improvements that they've actually done to the game like that. And I think the AI improvements is one of those additions to the game. And some of the special effects are maybe, you know, subjective in whether you like them more or not. But I actually enjoy the way that they ended up changing the look a lot, and especially since the UI is a lot cleaner and the game runs a lot more smooth on my machine. That said, there is some minor performance problems I am having here and there. The problem with the game is that every once in a while, and it's not exactly common, in the few hours that I ended up playing, it happened like once or twice, to where the frame rate would just randomly drop. And this is a problem in the original Dark Souls as well, to where it would just randomly drop your frame rate. Oh, I have to equip my shield. Whoops. It would just randomly drop your frame rate and then just not be able to recover for a while. And I found that this is a problem with having my VSync off. Whenever I turn the VSync on, it doesn't happen. but when I turn it off, for some reason there are some frame pacing issues that just randomly show up. And everyone is having weird issues with these specifically. As in, like, some people are like, oh, I have to turn it off, or other people are like, I have to turn it on. And some people are like, I have to play in full screen. Other people are like, I have to play it in borderless. And so I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's a frame pacing issue, and it was a problem in the original game, and it still is a problem in the original game. The problem with Blighttown, for example, isn't necessarily something to do with, you know, performance or whatever. It doesn't actually increase the load on your system whatsoever. It's actually just a problem with the game engine itself. The game engine just couldn't support that much detail inside of an area, and therefore it had problems rendering it. Now, if I ran into the Blighttown area, which I probably should have done before switching over, it actually performs fairly well. However, I do still experience frame skipping every once in a while in certain areas. For example, there was one enemy specifically that I ended up killing, and it played off a little visual effect and an item appeared. As soon as the item appeared, it just started dropping frames massively, and it didn't recover until I rebooted the game, which is just a problem with both of the Dark Souls versions, and it's unfortunate that they weren't able to fix this. And it shouldn't still be a problem. This is my main problem with the actual kind of remaster in general, is the fact that there are a lot of problems that they didn't fix. A remaster is a chance to go back and fix things that didn't work in the original. Now, I understand, you know, keeping in some of the weird glitchiness bugs and stuff like that that are in the game, because some of it is just engine related that they might not be able to fix. And other things are like, you know, some of the AI not responding to certain things. Like, there's certain bosses that won't respond when you're over a certain wall. Dark Souls has been out for a very, very long time. This is an old game. Going back and changing some of those things would change the spirit of the game in certain aspects, and so I respect them for that. But they did end up changing the AI. The AI is much more responsive. They actually respond as soon as you walk up to them, and everything feels much smoother. A lot of the effects have been improved. A lot of the actual gameplay elements feel a lot better to control, and it makes the game much more enjoyable for me, even though I already enjoyed the game a hell of a lot. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and the Remastered Edition actually does a good job of improving it, at least somewhat. It's not perfect, and it has a lot of problems, and there are bugs, especially when I ended up starting up the game for the first time and my controller wasn't working. That was a little bit frustrating, and I actually had to reboot my computer, install the new NVIDIA driver, and then actually boot the game up for my controller to work, which I don't actually know what the problem is there. And people are having different problems, and so I wasn't able to cover all of the problems inside this video, because a lot of the problems I'm not experiencing, and it's just, I don't know anymore how many of these problems are actually specific to whatever PC you're using, because while I could be like, oh yeah, it's a perfect port and I'm running problems, like my only problem is every once in a while I have this weird frame rate drop and I just have to reboot the game, which happens every few hours. And eventually I ended up fixing it, and fixing it just ended up turning on VSync, which was fine by me. Actually, I like having VSync on because this game tears like absolute crazy. But you know, other people might not be able to solve their problem with that. So I don't know all of the problems of this port. However, all the people that are saying that the DS fix version is technically hold on, what is the word for it? I wanted to say inferior, but that's not right, because it is inferior in certain ways. All the people that are saying it's the superior version, there we go. I don't know why I'm skipping on words today. I've been working all day, so sorry about that. Also, they've added in a bunch of little tutorials and things like that. Also, the hair color looks a lot better. I use the same hair color in both of the footages, by the way, for this character. And so the other one in the old Dark Souls looked really, really yellow. They also added some weird shadowy effects to it, which is kind of weird. Like, you can actually see through it. I don't know if it's supposed to happen, but it happens on half of the hairstyles. I don't know why. Anyways, the hair color is the same on both of those. But yeah, so basically, the people that are saying that the other version is better or whatever, the reality is that this is technically a better base game. And we could end up seeing patches and mods to this version that would fix it. And there's a lot of things that the DS fix cannot fix that this version does fix. That said, however, visually, it's not that big of an upgrade when you end up getting DS fix and heavily mod the original game. The biggest improvement is the gameplay improvement, because they were actually able to go through and enhance the actual game itself. They were able to go through and improve the actual code of the game, which makes the game more enjoyable to play. And for me, personally, it has improved a game that I already loved. It was a game that I kind of went through with its wonkiness because it was a game that I loved. I really enjoyed playing it, and that was the reason why I kind of went ahead and dealt with all the issues, because it was a good freaking game that I wanted to go and play. And it's been improved, which is good. That said, it's not as good as I wanted it to be. And this is not worth the $40. If you are somebody who didn't own the original Dark Souls on PC and you're looking for, you know, the Dark Souls experience, you're going to be forced to shell out $40 or wait for it to go on sale. Like, it's an unfortunate reality to where they decided to go up from, because it was originally $20 to begin with just to buy the Prepare to Die edition. And so it was like, oh, hey, you know, buy that for $20 and you get Dark Souls, which is a great game. If you're looking to buy it now, you got to spend 40. And the limited time sale thing for people that already own Dark Souls is apparently limited time. And so if you already have the original Dark Souls and don't have the $20 right now to end up buying the remastered edition, or you don't want to spend the $20 to get the remastered edition, because it's essentially the same game. If you're not planning to replay through it like I am, then it's not going to be worth it. But saying that again, like, it's not worth the price tag, in my opinion, if you already have the original game. And here's some of the more contrast. I don't have footage from the original game because I didn't pick it up. My game keeps crashing. The original Dark Souls for me keeps crashing because it's not, like I said, the DS6 has problems. But here's one of the great examples of some of the lighting and some of the contrast to where, you know, outside of the light, it is incredibly dark, to where inside the light, it can actually be quite bright and beautiful. So, yeah, and these blue lights and stuff like that, they look gorgeous. Like, the game has actually been improved quite a bit. But then again, it's not worth the price tag. And that's my main problem with this, is the fact that it's just not worth the price tag that they put on it. And it's kind of unfortunate that they did that, because reselling this remaster for like $20 across the board would have been kind of nice, you know, being able to go back and be like, hey, this game was already $20, but now you can get a superior version for $20, and that would be actually fantastic. But Dark Souls is popular enough that I think they kind of get away with it, because it's freaking Dark Souls. Everyone on PC pretty much already has it, and if they don't, then I guess they got to suck it up and pay $40. It's an unfortunate reality, to be honest. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this one. And of course, you can leave your thoughts in the comments below. Obviously, a lot of people will say that the DS fix version or whatever is, that's basically what I'm gonna call it, Prepare to Die edition, but modded, looks better. The reality is we could end up getting mods for this version as well. We don't actually know if it's gonna happen, but it is running on the same engine. So it's very likely that we could end up getting it if we really, really wanted it. But again, honestly, it's not that big of a difference, to be honest. And so if you're playing the original DS6 version, cool. I like this version better because it runs smoother, and so the gameplay is much more enjoyable to play. And that's what's important to me. If that's not what you're looking for, then doesn't really matter. And if you're not planning to play through Dark Souls again for like the 20th time, like all of us, then yeah, it also isn't worth the price tag. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Anyways, like I said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like my styles of content, you can check out my website at michaelpstanich.com, link in the description, as well as a link to our gaming Discord, which is called The Broken Chat Box, to where we have gaming discussions all the time, and this dragon just killed me. Also, the dragons and stuff like that look awesome. Oh, there is one thing. I want to show up the screenshot of the red dragon that's actually the Wyvern thing on the bridge or whatever. They made it redder, and it looks awesome. I don't know why. It looks better in the remastered. The bosses and stuff like that look better. The normal enemies, somewhat here and there. But yeah, anyways, like I said, thank you guys so much for watching, and check out our Broken Chat Box. It is link in the description. It's a gaming Discord where we talk about video games when we play stuff. So if you want to play Dark Souls and play some multiplayer, I have the remastered edition, so maybe we can go and kill some bosses. Actually, I play solo. I don't play online, so yeah, I'm a noob.